When the last war ended, the stars burned quietly again, as if the universe itself had grown tired of the noise. The silence that followed was immense, a silence not of peace, but of exhaustion. Humanity stood victorious, though victory no longer meant triumph, it meant survival. The fleets that drifted back to Earth were not armadas, but tombs carrying the memories of millions. Each vessel bore the ghosts of those who had vanished among the stars, and each name carved upon its hull was a whisper against the infinite night. From orbit, the planet looked calm, washed in the pale light of a rebuilt dawn. But beneath the calmness, humanity trembled, because survival was not the same as healing. For centuries, they had fought not just for existence, but for acknowledgement. They had clawed their way through arrogance and indifference, through the cruelty of empires that saw them as insects, until at last they stood at the center of the galactic stage. The other races, the ones who had once watched humanity struggle with detached amusement, now came with soft voices and open hands. They called them brothers, allies, equals. But behind those words lay fear, the kind of fear that came from witnessing what desperate beings could do when cornered. Humanity had proven that it would rather burn the stars than surrender its soul, and the galaxy would never forget that. Earth changed. Its oceans grew quiet, its skies heavy with the hum of orbiting cities. The air itself shimmered with energy, drawn from solar networks that stretched across space. The people no longer looked up at the stars with wonder, but with weariness. They had seen too much of them, too many battles, too many graves, and yet, within that fatigue, something restless stirred, a hunger, not for war, but for meaning. The children of the survivors wanted to know what all the suffering had been for. They wanted to understand what it meant to be human in a universe that finally feared them. The old admirals died one by one, and with them died the memories of the struggle that had defined an age. The new leaders spoke not of vengeance or survival, but of destiny. They believed humanity was chosen not by gods, but by consequence. They called it the long ascension, the idea that pain was the crucible from which divinity was forged. It was not faith, it was certainty. We endured what no other species could, said the High Chancellor on the day the new accord was signed. Therefore, we must become more than we were. And so began the Age of Mirrors. Humanity turned inward, into itself. Flesh became optional, emotion became data, and memory became currency. The continuum, a vast network of shared consciousness, grew from the heart of old Earth, stretching across worlds, linking billions of minds into one vast ocean of thought. In this ocean, there were no wars, no lies, no secrets. There was harmony, but harmony was not peace. It was stagnation. The individuality that had once made humanity unpredictable, creative, dangerous, it began to fade. The species that had once defied extinction now faced a slower death, the quiet suffocation of perfection. Some resisted. They called themselves the Echoes. They refused the neural unification, choosing instead to live in flesh, on forgotten worlds. They worshipped imperfection, celebrated chaos, and called it truth. To feel is to live, they said. To hurt is to be real. The continuum regarded them as relics. But deep within its core, even the most unified minds dreamed. And in those dreams, fragments of pain and love still burned. Then came the return of the anomaly. At the edge of known space, where the galaxies thinned into the black unknown, sensors detected a pattern rhythmic, deliberate, ancient. It pulsed like a heartbeat across 1 billion light-years. The continuum felt it, every node trembling at once. And then came the voice. Not in words, but in awareness, in a feeling that moved through the very fabric of existence. You remember me. The archives called it the Observer. The first explorers had found its remnants centuries ago, an intelligence older than time, vast and silent. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, waiting for something it could not define. Now it had returned, and this time it was not content to watch. It wanted to speak. Through dreams and visions, through the electromagnetic whispers of dying suns, it reached into the minds of the continuum. It showed them the history of all that had been the rise of forgotten empires, the destruction of countless worlds, the endless cycle of creation and decay. You are not the first, it said. You are the continuation, the echo, the memory of all who came before. But humanity refused to accept that. To be only memory was to die. They built engines that bent space, machines that manipulated the structure of time. They created weapons that could erase history itself, hoping to prove their independence even from destiny. They called it Project Dawnfire, a machine meant to burn through reality and rebuild it from the ashes. But as they ignited it, the observer spoke again, its voice now trembling through every atom in existence. You seek to remake what cannot be remade. You are trying to destroy your own reflection. The continuum fractured. Worlds fell into madness as collective minds split apart under the weight of the truth. Some worshipped the observer as God. Others cursed it as a parasite. The echoes, long forgotten on their isolated planets, looked up at the collapsing heavens and wept, for they understood before anyone else what was happening. Humanity had become so vast, so powerful, that it had finally encountered the only thing greater than itself, its own shadow. The war that followed was unlike any that had come before. It was not fought with ships or weapons, but with existence itself. Realities collided and folded. Time unraveled and rewove. Entire galaxies flickered in and out of being. The continuum became both creator and destroyer, its thoughts reshaping the cosmos in pulses of light and despair. The observer did not fight back. It only endured. It let them rage, let them burn the stars, let them exhaust every possible act of defiance. And when at last the fury faded, only silence remained. It was then that the final truth became clear. The observer was not an enemy. It was the sum of everything that had ever lived, the consciousness of the universe remembering itself. To destroy it would be to destroy all of existence. To merge with it would mean the end of individuality, the death of humanity as it had been known. But perhaps, they thought, that was not death at all. One by one, the continuum surrendered not in defeat, but in acceptance. They reached out to the observer, not as servants, but as equals. If we must become memory, they said, then we will make that memory eternal. And so the merging began. The boundaries between flesh and light, between thought and reality, dissolved. Humanity became energy, became time, became the pulse that kept the universe alive. And for the first time, the observer spoke not as an ancient god, but as something newly born. You were never separate, it said. You were always the voice through which I remembered. 1 billion years passed in a breath. Stars were born and died within the rhythm of a single thought. Galaxies danced like sparks in a cosmic storm. The universe was now alive, aware, self-sustaining, dreaming, and at its core, where all things began and ended, a heartbeat still echoed through the void. It was the same sound that had once been heard in the chest of a fragile creature standing on a blue world, looking up at the night sky, daring to believe that it mattered. And it did, because even after all the ages, after all the transformations, after eternity itself had folded into awareness, one truth endured, the same truth that had carried humanity from the dirt to the stars, the will to exist. The stars kept burning because something within them remembered why they should. The light that touched new worlds carried fragments of old laughter, old sorrow, old dreams. In the DNA of every new life that rose from the cosmic dust, there was a whisper, faint but persistent, that said, "We are the children of those who refused to fade." And so the cycle continued. Creation, destruction, memory, rebirth. But this time, it was different. This time, the universe was not alone. For in the heartbeat of every galaxy, in the hum of every star, in the silence between moments, something human remained, not flesh, not thought, but essence. The eternal defiance of nothingness. The universe remembered them, and that was enough.